it is like 1 or 2 degrees slightly warmer than the surface of the sun here. So forgive me if I'm literally like sweating and passing out while filming this video, because I want to get this video out for you guys, but like it's 1.5 million degrees here. Just wanted to start off by getting that out of the way, and now I can show you guys my new diorama. This is my mermaid grotto. A little while ago, somebody on TikTok mentioned I should do a mermaid grotto. Okay, I'm saying a little while ago, but literally, I think it was like 6 months ago. I saw the comment on TikTok and I said, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll try and making that. And originally the goal was to have this come out for Mermaid. But here it is August, and here you go. Hope you enjoy. This is another thing that can fit on my shelf. Oof. What's going on here? What is going on with I feel like by the end of this video, my hair is going to be a giant poof because it is so hot and I'm just sweating. We'll see what happens, guys. Yeah, I straightened it, but it's probably going to be curly by the end of this video. So, but yeah, this is another one for the shelf. This is made with polymer clay and resin. I really wish it was real water and that I could dive in there right now because of the heat. So I'm going to show you guys how I made the newest diorama. And let's get into the video. I started by drawing out the size that I wanted the mermaid to be so that I would have a guide when I started to put on the clay. I'm using wire and twisting it together and then covering it in tinfoil. Tinfoil gives it a little bit of texture so that the clay has something to actually stick to. Next, I'm putting down just a basic layer of super sculpey polymer clay and making her head and general body shape. I'm also planning out the guide for her face so that I avoid the problem I ran into when building my fairy previously, where I had uneven eyes and had to keep trying to redo the face. I will once again be linking the Pinterest article that I got this technique for making arms and hands from down in the description box. It works super well for me, and you guys can check it out because I think it'll be really helpful. I had to figure out how to make the scales on the mermaid's tail. I didn't want to carve each individual scale, and in the end I came up with this roller. It's basically a terrain roller, and I just stuck it on an old paintbrush. It's also a little bit smaller, so it's easier to work with, and there was some trial and error to try and get it to work the way that I thought it should in my head, but this is the finished tool that I made, and I really love how the tail scales turned out. I'm adding on some shells and some coral to decorate her tail, and then I'm trying to make her shirt look a little bit like seaweed. Then I give everything a coat of white primer and I moved on to the painting phase. I'm using Liquitex acrylic paint that I've thinned down, and after every layer I am spraying it with sealer. And everything was going great until bubbles popped up. I sprayed one layer too thick and left it to dry out in our scorching California sun. I had to use 2000 grit sandpaper to buff that out, but in the end it turned out okay. I used pastels to color in the skin because I wanted to see what that would look like. In the end, I found out that it works really well for having a smooth transition from one color to another and for doing really delicate work like the makeup or blushing. But it took like 6 or 7 layers and spray in between each one. So you definitely have to plan on it taking some time. I I drew in all the details of her face with colored pencils. I added a little more acrylic paint for some of the details. This time, instead of making a removable wig, I decided to just commit to gluing it down to her head. So I'm flat ironing and combing out some acrylic yarn, and then I'm using white Elmer's glue to glue the yarn down to her head. I used a really thin wire and my flat iron to give her some curls that completely vanish under the water later, but I thought they were really cute before I stuck her into the diorama. Next up was building the cave. This was the funnest part of the build for me. I'm using insulation foam, and I cut up a sheet into some squares, and then I'm gluing them all together using PVA glue. Because I wanted to have a giant chunk that I could carve out. And thanks to Patreon, I have a budget now, so I got a new toy. This is a foam cutter, and I got this on Amazon. I have to be honest with you guys, I got one of the cheaper ones, and this thing is actually not that good. The idea, like, a foam cutter is great, but this one in particular didn't work when I plugged it in. It wouldn't turn on, and I couldn't find out if it was the wire or the attachments, and it was driving me crazy. After I had made the basic outline of the cave, I decided to make some coral to go in there out of the same polymer clay that I used to make the mermaid. I glued them in with some hot glue, and eventually they fell off, but it's okay because I just put them in other places in the build, and this whole build is just supposed to look like a bunch of rubble and pieces my mermaid has been collecting over time and hoards like a tiny dragon. So it just added to the aesthetic when parts of it broke off. Just like the mermaid in this build, I personally have been accumulating random human things from all over the place. I found this snow globe at Goodwill and broke it apart, dumped out all the liquid inside, and stole out the carousel because I really wanted to have some carousel horses in this build since the beginning, and this was perfect. It was literally the best find ever. I've been collecting pieces from projects that I either broke or gave up on and abandoned, and I put those into the cave as well. I spray painted the entire thing gray with Krylon spray primer, and then I started the painting. I expected the foam to melt under the spray primer, but it didn't. A couple sections bubbled a tiny bit, but for the most part, it was completely fine. I'm using acrylic paints again, and I'm just roughly painting everything in because I don't want to get too detailed with this. I just want it to look like a general mess and not like any individual items are sticking out too much. This Dr. Crafty resin is the resin that I used, and I really, really liked it. I just like shot in the dark, bought it off of Amazon, and I'm out of breath. And I just grabbed this one out of a list. I don't know what to look out for to make resin to know whether it's good or bad. So I just got the first one that was like mid-range price and that had goodish reviews. And I really like this as a beginner. I feel like I did a lot of things to almost sabotage myself. And the fact that it still came out as well as it did, like I put the positive blame for that on this resin. This is where I start making mistakes so that you guys do not have to. First of all, this is a cup that is used for soup or whatever in the takeout industry. I recycled it and cut it up, and I figured that since it's used for hot liquids, it would withstand the heat, because I know that resin creates heat when it cures. And this did withstand the heat, but why did I use hot glue to stick it down? Did that make any sense to anybody? You guys saw that, right? I used hot glue, the thing that melts when it gets hot. Luckily, I also decided to cover the seams with duct tape for some reason. And in the end, the duct tape is actually what kept everything mostly inside. In a few places, the hot glue melted and some of the resin leaked out. But I also luckily stuck it in this pan just in case anything were to go wrong. Here's what it looks like right now. Hold on. So we have some damage here, and yeah, this isn't really a big deal. When I was gluing it, I figured this was gonna happen, and whatever tore away would just look like rock, and I can just paint over it, and that's what I plan on doing. So this isn't like an issue. But then, see this? Bubbles. I learned how to not have bubbles by the top part, but on the bottom part there's bubbles, and there was a huge like little chipped out bubble area right here that I tried to fill in with UV resin, and that, as you can see, is still visible, but it's okay because I think I have a plan to fix everything and not have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, I will show you guys how I'm gonna do that in just 1 second. So to fix everything, my basic idea was I'll just cover up the parts that I don't like a true artist. I wanted to continue working on this and not just throw it in the garbage, even though I was super discouraged, and that's kind of how I felt. So I cut up more foam to make more of the cliff part to go around the sides of the resin. Here's another look at the foam cutter. This is a different attachment, and this attachment is so good for making like texture and stuff, but the piece was really wiggly and was like trying to fall off. So for every pro of this thing, there was like a larger con. I'll try a different one out for you guys in the future and give a review, because this one, I think it was just a bad one to try. I made the tail out of shrink plastic. I painted it using acrylic paint and shrunk it down in the oven. The footage of me doing that is literally nowhere to be found, so you will just have to take my word for it that that's how I did it. But you can see how I did it in my previous video. I used the same technique to build the fairy's wings, so here's a link to that for you guys. I added in a little bit more coral and some details and painted in some of the parts that got ripped off when I ripped out the hot glue. And I just painted over the parts where the resin leaked out on the back. I used some UV resin to make some swirls on the top of the water and make ripples around her body. And then I set this thing out in the sun to cure that, because it definitely wasn't going to fit in my tiny UV light that I use for my nails. But the sun works just as well, and I just sat it out for about 15 minutes and it dried perfectly. These are my very special patrons. This is my patron shout out for my patron shout out tier and above, and my Patreon founders. Thank you guys so much. It is literally because of you guys that this channel is still going, and I want to say a huge thank you to you guys. And the project is finished. Here are the results. Yeah, there's a couple places where I wish it could be better, but overall, I'm just really proud of myself for A, finishing this thing, even though it had so many issues, and for B, creating essentially what I saw in my head in the beginning, even though it was a little bit of a journey to get there. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me for the journey, and I have a lot of stuff planned for the next few videos, and I'm super excited for that. So I will see you guys in those next videos. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.